Okay.
Okay, perfect. Lovely. Hi, hello. My name is Dinah Ofosu, and welcome to Voices at the Top, where untold stories meet unstoppable change. I'm your host for today, and I'm the project research volunteer and also a final year student in the Bachelor of Science with honors degree in integrated health and social care at the University of Bedfordshire, Bedford campus to be precise. And my question today is, what does it take to rise when the system wasn't built for you? And how do you lead when you are the only one at the table who looks like you? This is a little question I just want you to think about as we go through and dive through our discussions today. Today, we're not just talking about representation, we're talking about revolution. And today, we want to dive deep into the heart of a moment or a movement that is reshaping boardrooms, breaking stereotypes, and redefining power. So, this is breaking barriers for ethnic minority women in leadership. And as part of this podcast, it is part of my project dissertation, which is a SaaS change maker project with the University of Bedfordshire. And the podcast aims to explore or address the barriers that minority ethnic women face in reaching leadership roles across sectors, focusing on how these challenges affect confidence and career goals. And in partnership with several seats and experts from the University of Bedfordshire, this podcast will be sharing insights and personal stories and also survey findings that had already been done previously to highlight the inequalities and suggest strategies for change. So the aim is to raise awareness and to empower women and strengthen mentorship support for professional growth. So this is it. At this stage, we're going to go into a time of guest introduction. And today it is so exciting. I am so excited today because we've got great personalities among us. And we have four strong guest speakers who are joining me on the virtual seat. And the first person I would like to introduce is the project sponsor, who is in the person of Miss Joan Idowu. She is the founder of Several Seats, which is a non-profit initiative promoting mental health and well-being in minority women. Miss Joan Idowu is a passionate advocate for mental health and addressing health inequalities. She has received two awards last in 2023, which is the Angel Maldi Young Social Entrepreneur Award and also the Silver SME National Award for Young Business Person of the Year. She provides essential resources to support and empower women from diverse backgrounds. She's also experienced in mental health advocacy, community outreach, and leadership. And she's driven by a strong personal or a strong desire to create positive social change. So, welcome, Miss Joan Idowu.
Thank you. Wow, I feel very
Okay.
privileged and honored to be here today. Yeah, it's amazing the work that you're already doing, and it was such a lovely pleasure and a refreshing addition to the team to have someone who embodies our vision, our mission, and our goals. You just link so well with the organization, and to see that you are bringing research to the things that we're already talking about means that we can translate this to more people. I think sometimes it's a bit tricky when people don't necessarily get it. You know, they say when you get it, you get it. When you don't, you don't. But the work you're doing helps other people understand and get a bit of insight. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, for joining us today. So, my next guest speaker is a mentorship representative from Several Seats, in the person of Miss Rashida Temutopi Fashina. And she's here to share some insights in her experience as a former mentee on the program. And she has educational program a background in masters, so masters in international business, in data analytics, at the University of Bedfordshire. So she's an alumni. So that's really good to have you on board today. And she also has a PhD in linguistics. She She's been a recipient of multiple prestigious awards. And in terms of professional, she is an educator. She works as an SO teacher in Luton, supporting immigrants and asylum seekers in language and skills development. In terms of mentorship and volunteering, she's aspiring volunteer mentor with several seats in Luton, supporting young people, young women, personal and career development. And she is also driven by belief in education, empathy, and innovation to inspire excellence. So, Ms. Rashida, you are most welcome as well.
Nice to be here. Thank you. I'm pleased to be here to be with Joanne and every other person on the seat. Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you so much. So now I move on to our two wonderful senior lecturers at the University of Bedfordshire. The first person on my list is Dr. Sambulewi Sibanda. He is a principal lecturer and portfolio lead for the undergraduate integrated health and social care degree. He is my lecturer at the, I think, level 5. And he's going to provide some academic insights from a male's perspective. So with Mr. Sam, he is experienced interdisciplinary researcher with interest in health inequalities and health provision in low-income countries and widening access and participation in higher education. He has supervised 2 PhDs and 5 masters of public health by research to completion. And he has been institutional EDI, which is Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Lead at the university for 18 months. So you're welcome, Mr. Sam.
Thank you for the intro. So happy to be on this platform with some wonderful people. I will take it as a learning opportunity this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on board with us today. And the last speaker is Dr. Lace Jackson. So Dr. Lace Jackson is a British-born child of Windrush Caribbean parents. She began her career as a qualified social worker or social work practitioner in the early 90s. She's worked in regions including East End of London, Northamptonshire, Oxfordshire, and Suffolk. She's held various roles from frontline to senior leadership in public and charity sectors. She's a former executive director of a clinical psychotherapy research institute in the charity sector. She's a founder and managing director of Purple Lace Consultancy, which is a limited company. And her research focuses on societal and organizational dynamics affecting marginalized groups, especially global majority leaders. She's also a recent author of the book Global Majority Leaders, The Experience and Practice, which discusses challenges in the UK and recommends actions for more inclusive spaces. So good to have you, Miss Lace Jackson.
Thank you so much. I feel really, really humbled to be here. And like I said, I'm just blown away just by the introductions of the guests on the panel. And I've got a lot to learn. So yeah, just really happy to be invited. And thank you, Dan, for the space to be, shared my contributions.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And you're all welcome. You're also welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. And so we go into the time where we ask questions. And this is the interesting aspect because we're going to be looking at academic insights. We're going to be looking at experiences. And we're going to learn a lot today because it's all about change. Change. And that's what it is all about. So the questions are going to base around the challenges that minority ethnic women encounter in professional spaces. So the impact on self-confidence and career aspirations and how mentorship programs like several seats offer can support mentorship development. So our first key discussion is about understanding the gap. And so my first question is to Dr. Lace Jackson. You have written a book about global majority leadership, um, published in 2024. And in page 21 of that book, you state that the experiential effects of being frozen within an organization appear to leave some global majority leaders internalizing feelings of low self-esteem, defeat, and self-loathing. feeling dismissed and wanting to switch off. Could you please unpack this statement for us, and how do these effects, act as barriers to career progression, particularly for minority ethnic women?
Thank you. Great question. As you said, and it kind of made me. I haven't touched the book, all the thesis since I wrote it, really. It made me go back and think. And actually, what I was trying to say was that organisational milieus and environments are shaped by society and the norms within society. So effectively, those norms are transferred into organisational spaces and practice. And what I found in terms of my research was that both intergenerationally, and I have to kind of speak in terms of the group of global majority people here in the 1950s, 1960s, it was a very cold, very violent and physically violent and racist, environment that they were walking into as the Windrush generation. And then what we found that's translated more recently into organisational structures is the coldness of and particularly the British context, in terms of how those from global majority backgrounds are experiencing those environments and organisational milieus. And that effectively means what they experience is isolation, microaggressive practices. And in the 1940s, when they were invited here to rebuild Britain, particularly, what they found is that there was always talk of this Cold War, but in organisations it kind of translates into what we call a silent war. And those frozen force fields or invisible force fields that they experience within those organisational milieux. So that was kind of what I meant by that term, in terms of then how because it's so invisible, you get this self-loathing because you're gaslighted by an organisation that makes it appear as if it's you, the victim, and
right.
there's something wrong with you, and you're questioning yourself, and therefore you're internalising that. And then over time, that leads to an erosion of your psychological health and well-being.
Great. That's great. That makes me think about Alex Fox, I think 2018, where he talks about the invisible asylum. So that is really good. Thank you. Thank you so much. So my next question is, how do you assess the representation of minority ethnic women in leadership across different industries? So if I say different, I'm looking at the public, both public and private sectors. And have you observed any notable patterns of, or disparities in your research at all, or could be personal?
Yeah, both. I looked at a number of different sectors within my research. So I had research participants from public sector, policing, social care, judiciary, sports, banking, charity, voluntary sector. And there's not just, in terms of what their lived experiences and what they were sharing with the group, but also a number of recent studies and statistics for the, Office of National Statistics, workforce and data, that basically highlights the underrepresentation of not just Black women, but global majority individuals in relation to being 10% of the population, but yet having less than 6% of, any notable recruitment into senior leadership roles, and that's across the board. And in fact, in terms of judiciary, there aren't any. In terms of senior judges, in terms of head teachers and higher education, we're still finding very few out of 35,000 professorships. There's only 65 now, global majority professors, and that's been within the last 5 years. So it's kind of a general pattern across the board and across many sectors. It isn't unique.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much for that submission. So just moving on to insights, expert insights or personal experiences. Can you share any experience or from your research findings some of the challenges and how these challenges actually create inequalities, and how do these inequalities affect confidence and career aspirations?
Yeah, I think, like I said, the main findings really link to both the societal milieu and the organisational milieu, and what does that mean in terms of what's the narratives that carry on in those spaces, and how are they, in a sense, embedded within the narratives of organisations. And in terms of personal challenges that global majority people find are things like racism and rootlessness, unbelonging, tokenism, and solo roles. So there's not this affiliation with those at the top of the organisation, so they are unable to progress and have ties with sponsors because they don't look like them. So there's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on to keep them out of those ranks. On a professional basis, it's that marginalisation through stereotype, and I call it operationalised marginalisation, where policy and practice prevents global majority people from progression, and it's also then fraught with intense scrutiny, over monitoring of not just how you do things, but what you look like and how you can behave. And so those things create inequalities, but it also erodes over time people's confidence. And we know that, in terms of mitochondrial DNA and brain connections, when you're constantly surrounded by negative environments, it does present you with, psychological and social and material consequences. But yet, one of the other findings that I found was, how do global majority people do those that break through not just the glass ceiling or the concrete ceiling, but the reinforced concrete ceiling, still break through regardless? And what we found is a different, I call leadership practice that is engaged in terms of leadership practices by those global majority groups. So some that we can mention are things like pioneering leadership, which many see as them being the one of first in that particular role, but also understanding that they have responsible leadership because they know that recruitment isn't just them, it's never just their leadership practice, they're also bearing the standard for those coming behind them. And so there's a level of both pride with that, but also a lot of pressure with that as well. So it's kind of like having to be multilingual in both white spaces and black spaces as well.
Wonderful,
I hope that answers the question.
Yes, perfect. I like the way you flick psychology and everything, mixing everything together. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'll leave you to rest for a bit and I'll move to Mr. Sam. So Dr. Sam, I remember level 5 when you taught me about global public health. We did a few bits about, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And one of them is Target 5, which looks at dismantling systemic barriers and addressing biases to help achieve gender equality. However, there's cultural stereotypes and unconscious bias. It continues to impact minority ethnic women's progression into leadership roles. So I want you to tell me, from your experience, how do men in leadership perceive or respond to these cultural barriers? And what role can you play, for example, or male allies play in dismantling the systemic barriers and create more equitable pathways for these women?
Thank you for that interesting question. I use interesting because I don't know any other word to actually describe it, but that's a very important question to ask. And even though you talk of cultural stereotypes and unconscious biases, I think listening into Dr. Lace, you find that we have moved from unconscious biases to conscious biases as well, so
Yes.
I think it's important to actually keep that context. But in terms of the response from male leaders, there are two responses that I would want to look at, the positive and the negative. The the one that was common occurrence is where there is this understanding that we are just an organization, we are an extension or a part of society. This problem exists in society. So in a way, people just bury their heads in the sand, and because this is a problem that is not unique to them in a way. So they don't do anything about it. They maintain the status quo and life goes on. And then there's the other side, whereby you feel there are some male leaders that can be enlightened, that can understand, what is happening, and people that actually are passionate about social injustice and they want to do something about it. And but for these men, what tends to be a major impediment is that they do not have that nuanced understanding of what is at play, maybe because remember, they are coming from a privileged position where they are well insulated to actually understand what is happening to all these women of from different minority ethnic groups. And what then tends to happen is that in as much as they would want to be doing something, they end up not doing anything because number one, they lack the understanding, they lack the know-how to actually, do something about it. And also do not forget that these are spaces which are well protected, and then they've got people surrounding them who would want to protect the status quo. Because at the end of the day, when you're opening a space for somebody else who doesn't look like us, it means that one who looks like us has to vacate that space. So we have to be very clear and understand why at times there is a lot of talk about there has to be change or we want to change, but then we do not see that change actually manifesting because there is that deliberate ploy to actually at times when we talk about things, but then protect those spaces and maintain the status quo. So that is the unfortunate position that we that people find themselves in. And also, let's not forget that when you look at minority ethnic women actually aspiring for leadership, who are they competing against? It's important to also understand the intersectionality between race and gender. And then you are also looking at women of color. They're competing against white counterparts. They're competing against male counterparts. They're competing against black males, who are always ahead of them in the pecking order. So I think it's important that at times we tend to trivialize some of these issues. These are real issues which impact women of color, in a very negative way, if I can use that double negative there, and it's important that something gets done. And like I said, we've moved away from unconscious biases to conscious. People know what they're doing.
Yes.
The system knows what it is doing. They know who they are shutting out, and they know who they want to keep in. So these have been my experiences to in terms of this. It's either the people that want to make some changes, they are not knowledgeable enough, or at times they are not willing to be educated to understand the intricacies of this problem so that they can make informed decisions that can result in tangible change.
Lovely. I think on my next question, you probably touched on the answer a little bit, but I'm still going to ask anyway. So, in your opinion, you've mentioned that it's important that we move away from this conscious biases, and so as a male ally or as a mentor, what role can you play to support minority women in leadership roles?
Well, as an ally, I think the first thing is to really educate oneself, understand, especially from the perspectives of the women, it's so easy to carry an understanding that comes from anecdotes and the like, but there has to be an understanding where we educate ourselves and we understand. Especially, I touched on the intersectionality between race, culture, gender, and the like. We really have to understand those aspects because they are actually key to us doing something. And then also there has to be a creation of space where women, minority ethnic women, they come in and they can actually talk about their lived experiences, in safe spaces, because
Yeah.
that is where you really get to, understand how they're feeling, understand how they wish things could be moved forward, and then have a better understanding of how one can actually help or how one can actually advance their cause. And it is also important as a male ally that I actually promote and I amplify the achievements of my minority ethnic colleagues, because more often than not, there is great work that gets done by these fantastic colleagues of ours. But then you find nobody, actually talks about it. Nobody actually
Yeah.
showcases it in any space. So I think where people have got the rich and where people have got the status to do things, then it has to be practical steps. And also, there has to be tangible support in the form of, you know, creating networks and opening up networking channels for these fantastic women so that they belong, so that they are part of a group, and we have to move beyond just recognition of this gender or this sex to recognizing the talents, recognizing the skill set, recognizing the competencies that these leaders actually have. And
Mm.
it is when you can facilitate in that way that we start to normalize women, stepping up and occupying these spaces and these positions of power.
It's great. It's great. It's wonderful to hear all this coming from the male perspective. So there is definitely an issue. Definitely, there is an issue, and I'm glad that this podcast is raising the awareness and educating other people. I'm just going to chip in one of the surveys that we had from the survey I conducted for these mentors or mentees from several seats. You talked about safe spaces. And so this mentee, when she joined, was pregnant, and she had this fear. She had this fear that she couldn't do it. But then she explains here that in her submission that she found space to talk about and brainstorm without fear of judgment. And she thinks that that was so important, to her. So I think, creating that space for women to talk, as you were saying, I think it's really, really important. But most of the times it's overlooked. And sometimes this is why all these issues crop up. But thank you so much for that submission. That is wonderful. So my very last question to you then is, what can organizations or institutions do? So from your background and with experience as equality, diversity, and inclusion lead, what do you think are some of the practical steps that institutions can actually take to ensure that there's equality in leadership?
Thank you. At the heart of it is the promotion of inclusive policies. That's the first thing, because if the policy does not exist to actually ensure that we have inclusive practices, in terms of recruiting people into the organization, in terms of retaining people, in terms of promoting people, then you find that we can talk until we are gray, without achieving anything. So it's important that there are policies that actually promote, the advancement of women from minority ethnic groups. And some of these policies, they have to really touch on, pay equity, for instance. We've been talking about the gender pay gap, I don't know for how many years now. Why is it that we cannot just achieve it overnight? Because it's a case of saying, right, it's two different people, sexes, but they're doing the same job. So it's a no-brainer. They have to earn the same amount, and then we move on. And I think from an EDI space, like you asked, you find there are tools that institutions have to actually bring in. And the number one thing that must happen is that there has to be a transformation of the environment. There has to be a transformation of the institutional ethos. How does an institution actually operate? And it should be that you have got anti-racist agenda right across the board. Because if you cannot come out and say, we are anti-racist, we are not going to stand for people being held back because of their race, then I can assure you, by not saying that, it means then you could be, a racist institution. So it's important that there is that outright, we are going to be anti-racist, we are going to promote the advancement of people. And then the most important thing as well is that the people that often are at the heart of driving this agenda are the gatekeepers, are the people that are actually have been cultivating this agenda for a long time. So what you need is a bottom-up approach whereby all the changes in terms of transforming the environment, they are actually the balance of power shifts to the people who need to see that change, the people that need to be promoted. And they have to be the people that are within those different committees driving the agenda, pushing the agenda forward. Because more often than not, across the organizations, not that maybe there's anything that may be wrong if you've got the right people, you will find that head of EDI, managers that are leading EDI, at times they are white, middle class people. And the reality is they may not understand some of the lived experiences, of the different colleagues. So it is important that you've got people there that have got an understanding of what the lived experiences are and an understanding of what the perceived, positive changes are without actually thinking, what, this is not good for the organization or this is not good for the institution. Because at the end of the day, you tend to have people that will talk the talk, but they are not prepared, to ruffle some feathers. They will always protect the institution ahead of the individuals that are actually crying out for that change. So more involvement of the people that actually are at the receiving end of some of these wrong practices, some of these bad practices. They have to be driving the agenda in terms of how they think this can be actually transformed.
That's perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Sam. Thank you, Dr. Sam. So I move on now to Miss Johnny Doe. And we just want to hear from your side as well what actually your inspiration is and what actually inspired you to establish several seats and the key objectives of the mentorship program.
Thank you. I guess many reasons inspired me, but I guess the inspiration behind several seats was established because there was a deep recognition about the unique mental health challenges faced by ethnic minority women. That's challenges often compounded by stigma, cultural barriers, the lack of representation in the mental health system, which Dr. Sam and Dr. Lace have already spoke and given a lot of insight into. But I guess most importantly, my own lived experience. I work as a mental health professional and I'm very proud of the work that I do and I love working with the NHS. But as I went through the educational academic system, I saw that the number of Black individuals, let alone Black women, started to significantly decrease. And I found myself stepping into a field where there was a lack of cultural competency or sensitivity in the space. And the same question kept coming up. Why is there not enough minority people accessing the NHS service from a mental health point of view? And the same question I kept asking is, where's the rest of my minority women in the field and men in the field? And I decided that I saw a real need for a space, a culturally sensitive space, where women could be seen, heard, and supported, not only as service users or people accessing the service, but also as future professionals within the mental health field. I saw that there was a real need for there to be conversations that moved away from just it being primary and secondary needs, but it being a ground-based community issue and dealing with it at the root of it before it became a primary concern. Thinking about promotive positive mental health from the, like Dr. Sam said, from the bottom up, and thinking around supporting the women where they're at through sisterhood, through community, because then that's where it happens. It's really challenging to enter into a system. As someone myself who has had therapy, going into a place where I'd never spoken about it, let alone with my family, that I've had to now speak about it with a clinician. And just a bit about my own lived experience and where the name came from. I was doing my master's and I was in the midst of struggling heavily with just the demands, and also recognizing I'd gone into a space where once again I went into being the only Black lady in the room, and I felt like an imposter. And we speak about it a lot: imposter syndrome within the workplace, imposter syndrome in academia. And I'd gone and I felt like I shouldn't be here. I don't know how I managed to get into this course. I'm not smart enough. I'm not cultured enough in that aspect. I don't speak the same way that everyone else does. I'm here eating my jollof rice in the back of the classroom. I'm not supposed to be here. And it started to dawn on me, and it started to affect me both mentally and physically. And one day I called my mum and I said, you know what, I'm going to drop out. I'm not going to do this anymore. And she said, take a seat, let's talk. We spent, it felt like hours talking about generational trauma that I didn't realize existed. My mum had never spoken to me about her own mental health challenges, and nor had she heard about mine. And even going through what my grandma had faced, and that kind of cultural mentality of, you know, you get up and go. Yeah, life is about hard work. Life is tough, but we're tougher, right? And I come from a Nigerian background, and it was always that mindset of, I'm not the only one struggling, so why should I make it an issue? But we spoke and we were so vulnerable with each other. And for the first time in a very long time, I love my mum so dearly, but I felt like she really saw me. And most importantly, I saw her. I saw her not only as my mum, but I also saw her as the girl she was, and the lady she was, the woman she used to be and has now become. And I decided from that moment on, I wanted to create a space. I wanted to create a table where women could invite other women to take a seat, take several seats, and speak openly, honestly, and start these conversations that then will lead into policy changes, that will lead into guidelines. But it starts from home, it starts from that sisterhood. And I guess I'll go on to then the mentorship program, which was born from that same vision. It aimed to promote positive mental health and well-being among minority women by empowering the next generation of mental health professionals from these communities themselves. How can a lady who's experienced anxiety, who's experienced depression, empower herself to then after want to give back and feed into the community? And by pairing aspiring professionals with mentors who understand their lived experience, who have been through what they've gone through, who are also experiencing imposter syndrome and learning in the journey, because that's what it's all about. I still, as a professional, will have moments where I have imposter syndrome, but I have the strategies now to tell my imposter to sit back and get behind me. And we help to build their confidence, to break down those barriers, to enter into that sector, particularly the healthcare sector, and increase diversity within the mental health workforce. Now, ultimately, we believe that representation can lead to more effective and empathetic care. And that's what Several Seats is all about. And that's what the mentorship scheme is all about.
That's great. That's great. Wow, that's such a very emotional story you shared there. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so just moving on to how does the program, the mentorship program, how does it address these leadership barriers for ethnic women? And do you have any success stories that you would like to share with us?
Yes, so I guess the mentorships program, when I initially launched it, we thought about it being more of a space to pair people up, and there wasn't much of a direction. But actually, we understood that we needed to introduce a more focused leadership skills based agenda, and we introduced public speaking exercises, thinking about how do you advocate within the workplace, navigating workplace dynamics, and we also created opportunities for mentees to take more visible roles. Whether that was co-facilitating events, contributing to community panels, or even leading their own peer support initiatives. That was a very key role in helping us help them build leadership skills to go into the wider world. We understand that that's the biggest challenge. It's hard enough to get your foot in the door, but then that's where the hard work starts, is staying in the door, staying in that room, not feeling constantly pushed out, and not also feeling like you need to leave because you don't deserve the place. We spoke earlier about tokenism. That's a huge barrier for loads of women when they go into a workplace and they feel like they don't have the power to have their voice heard, which is what leadership is. Leadership is having your voice, using it, and then creating change, right? And the idea of this nature in leadership was within creating those spaces and limitations. When I think about a standout story, I'm going to say her name because I want to give her flowers. A mentee that we had in the program that also became a mentor was Chidima. And she initially went into the program kind of wanting to explore where she was going to go in her role in psychology. And she really pushed herself, and in finding her confidence and applying for courses, she managed to get onto a mentorship scheme and get a scholarship. And she is now a trainee clinical psychologist, and soon to be doctor. And every time I see her on LinkedIn, I'm always in awe of her work and her progression. And one of the first things we said in her cohort was show up. The biggest thing you can do is show up in life. And I remember her talking to me, we caught up not long ago, and she said that was the greatest level of advice for me, because it made me think no matter where I am, I'm showing up. I'm not just showing up for me, but I'm showing up for the people that came before me, and I'm showing up for the people that will come after me. If I'm present and I'm more than just a person in the room, but I am a voice that propels itself, then I'm showing up. And it really, it was really lovely to kind of see her secure her place and now become a qualified psychologist in a couple more years.
Wow, this is amazing. That's such an amazing story. I volunteered with several seats as well during my level 4 studies, and it was such an experience as well. I really loved the time that I shared with several seats. So yes, great work that you're doing. It's such a great effort. Honestly, it's not easy. I would think so, but you're doing a very fantastic job, and we need more women to stand out just like you've done. To bring about this change. So my last question probably to you, probably not the last one, but to you is that what improvement or expansions have you planned or have you put in place for the mentorship initiative?
We thought about 2 initiatives that we're hoping to launch. So we're thinking about creating a bursary to support those who have that financial barrier in accessing resources. Going to those conferences, one of the greatest things that I invested in was spending time going on Eventbrite and seeing what professional workshops or events or even networking things that I can go to. And I remember that being such a daunting experience for me. But again, it was showing up, it was being in the room. You can learn so much just by listening. I think my first ever conference I went to was for International Women's Day, and I didn't want to answer any questions, but I just listened. So the next time I went, I put my hand up and I asked the question. And after that, the next time I went around the room and spoke to the panelists. It's all about pushing yourself, showing up each time. So we really want to help ladies in allowing them to access some of these events. Some things are free, and unfortunately some things aren't. So we want to be able to support them in financially accessing some of those ones that aren't free. Another big thing that we are looking to improve on is actually the support we give to our mentors. Our mentees come in and they gain so much, but I think we want to do a lot more for the mentors on the program, because we understand that being in the sector is hard. And we spoke about it earlier when Dr. Lace mentioned about underrepresentation in leadership roles. And a lot of the mentors that come in mention about that kind of being feeling kind of stagnated, that there's not that growth. I haven't gone into management, and I've not gone into being a consultant. And I think there's a lot more work that Several Seats can do there in supporting these women. And that comes now with us thinking about the workshops and the training that we do with organizations. How do we prepare services to be ready to receive the women that we have who are equipped? It's no point in equipping these ladies with all the skills, the resources, the confidence to go into a service, and they get there and they feel shut down, and it's like you're having to start all over again. We need these places, as much as they've got so much funding to improve diversity and inclusion, but not actually being ready for it. An example of this is the DCLIN course for psychology. A lot of universities now have been given extra funding to allow for more minority students to be on the course, but then they don't have the layering. They have not prepared for what that comes with. They've not included the cultural competency to allow this flood of people who are ready to receive education and grow. So we want to be part of that. We want to be part of preparing organizations to have the right environment that allows women to flourish even once they are in that sector.
Perfect. So whilst you're doing that, I was looking through the surveys, and I can definitely tell you that all the points that you've raised to implement in the mentorship program they've all been highlighted as proposals or as suggestions. And some of them says that to work with universities to offer as part of scheme for international students. So that's partnership with academic institutions, to give opportunity for work experience or volunteering, to have larger cohorts for opportunities to meet in person, so that networking. And one also said to incorporate cultural competence in training. So all these things that you've mentioned, they've all been highlighted in the survey, which is quite good. And I'm really excited to hear about you here and saying that as well. So that's really good. Perfect. Thank you so much, Miss Idowu. Now I'm going to move on to my wonderful lady, Miss Rashida. Would you like to share your experience or challenges that you faced before joining the mentorship program, and did the mentorship program impact your career aspiration, leadership growth?
Okay, thank you. I've listened a lot. Okay, let me start with a quick story. When I entered the country, previously I had a lot of things going on. I was a graduate assistant. I was also a UI UX designer. I also had a business. So when I came into country, I did not really have anything to do. Not because I can't do these things, but I don't have the access to it. And I got a lot of unfortunately, and I was so frustrated. And then it was like we have a set of jobs put aside for us to do, which I wasn't so comfortable with. And I think I can do more. So for a couple of months, I wasn't working. I was just sitting at home and I was so frustrated. So I had to approach the school employability space. And that day, I think I saw several seat leaflet on the table. And I read it and I said, oh, for Black women. So I told the person, I want to explore this. Can I work on this? And he said, oh, this is not a job. This is just something you do like a mentor or a mentee for a time being. I said, I need this because I think I needed information that time than job. So when I joined Several Seats, the organization particularly has two programs: is one-on-one with your mentor, and then other webinars every Saturday. And I can say majorly Several Seats is like my schedule. They organize my whole thoughts because I wasn't really established in teaching here, and entry roles here is not paying well for tech, and all these things are just going on. And the mentor I was attached with, fortunately, was also a graphic designer who was then a student representative. So she told me that if you want to do these things, you have to do these courses. If you want to do this, you have to do these courses. Everything you're bringing, you have to rearrange and reschedule your things. And this is a very major contributor to my success today, which I'm really grateful
Mm.
for. So I can say several seats I rearrange everything in my head and give me a safe space to explore more and access to information. And this is really great.
Wonderful. So you've had really valuable experience there. So
Yeah.
that's really good. So would you recommend the mentorship program to other ethnic women? And if so, why?
Definitely, definitely. I think a lot of people here are more of survivor journey than pursuing a career path in particular. So several seats is there to give people room to explore other aspects of career rather than
Mm.
shutting themselves in a corner,
Yeah.
which is really not comfortable. Because if we are advocating for seats and then people are not moving towards where information is, then it is not really giving us exact thing which we needed. So as we are advocating for several for more seats on the table, then we have to have access to more information, because the major barrier I noticed here is that people lack information, and then there
Mm.
is no community for people to be vulnerable with each other. And this is what several seats provides. I remember the first meeting I had with my mentor was to um, tell her everything I think I can do. And when I told her everything, she told me us as well. It's like exchange. Then I became more comfortable and I started pouring everything out. Because before I was just like, oh, I don't know this person. But when she told me
Mm.
everything about her, I felt more comfortable. And if people have this kind of access, I think a lot of people will strive more than what we're currently doing. So definitely, I'm
Definitely.
going to
Recommend.
suggest people, yeah, join
Yeah.
Several Seat.
Wonderful. That's good. So what are some of the changes that you would like to see, or improvements, or because you've been through the program, so is there anything that you think that if they incorporate into the program would actually make it better, more effective?
I think during the course of the conversation, Joanna said a lot, and I think through the survey, you also listed some. So, majorly, the first thing I think is advocacy. I think we have to call more people into the program, because I remember when we have our Saturday webinars, we have limited numbers of people, and this is more important than the money people are really chasing. I know money is important, but when you have knowledge, sometimes
Mm.
it pays more
Makes a
than the cash.
difference. Yeah, that's
So
right.
I think we need more advocacy, that this is a
Mm.
program you need and you need to be here. You need
That's right.
this. So that's one. And another thing which you've also mentioned is partnering with people, because I remembered when I finished my mentorship with several seats, I mailed Joanne that this time around I'm ready and I want to work. And then she told me, if you want to work in NHS, I can help, and references. But I believe that we can, so far we want to cut across all the sectors. We we should try to give rooms for other people to join from other sectors, so that when we have
Mm.
mentees from other sectors, we have like a guideline for them through their
Mm.
to achieve the career they are really pursuing. Because I love teaching, I love education, and I couldn't really find myself pursuing another degree or another certification outside
Mm.
what I've already,
Very
the
good.
old portfolio. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think if we have people representations for from other sectors as well, then it will be easier for like follow follow up, and then institutions are available for us after the mentorship.
lovely, wonderful. Thank you so much. Those are really great suggestions there. So moving on to the very last section, I just want us to give our final thoughts, final advice, starting from Dr. Liz Jackson. Any final advice that you would like to unleash?
I like that word. I'm usually known as what you call a professional disruptor. I think that it's just been such a rich, discussion and perspective that we've all brought to, and great questions to be able to answer. And I think, like Dr. Sam said, it's moved really from unconscious to conscious, and I think we need to really own that. And also, I think there's something about that narrative that stops us or silences us even further, from seeing what's behind that in terms of this continuation of what I call colonialism, because that's the colonial project to keep us in our place. And I think that absolutely, just to hear that there's, several seats exists. And you mentioned about, me going everywhere in terms of psychology and social work, and that's because, when we take into ourselves our whole being and our authentic self, we can't separate anything that we do in terms of our physical, our mental, our spiritual, our psychological self, within the context that we're in, and separate that. And I guess the advice really is that we have to be able to operate. You mentioned the double bind of women, but I think there's also something about, there's a lot actually going on that people are talking about in respect of women leadership. But I think particularly for global majority communities, there has to be this coming together of the masculine and the feminine, and what are we doing for each other? Because even though males might be there, they might be the first that are chosen, they're chosen in a way that it's usually when organisations are in trouble and they need us, but they don't necessarily want us. And so we've got to be mindful of those, like I said, solo roles where we're spread across so thinly that we don't have that relational leadership that supports us to navigate the kind of labyrinth of, the organisations in which we're trying to operate and in which we're trying to exercise leadership. So we don't take up the whole space, but I guess that's my advice, is that we've got to come together and do things differently together.
That's right. Perfect. So where can we find your book? And are you making any plans on releasing another one for 2025?
Now you're putting me on the spot. So the book can be found, it's via Palgrave Macmillan, so it's a Spring of Nature. So it's available on all platforms like Amazon and the Spring of Nature website itself. I think you can access it through the library at the university for students. Yes, I am, and I have been thinking of the second book, which really will be targeted to global majority leaders, kind of the present and the future. And I really want to look at the leadership practices that I think there's a definite framework for those who are kind of Gen Z. And I now want to look at, well, what's the leadership practice of millennials? Because I think it is slightly different, shaped differently. So it'd be really good to be able to, enhance the book, but really talking to, and you'll see that I use autoethnography. I haven't in the book, but in my thesis there's a lot of autoethnography and oral history in terms of what we bring to that. So I want to be able to talk to us and our community really on a real level, so they kind of get, and you said, Sam said, educating ourselves. We have to educate ourselves in terms of these devices that are used to, like I said, keep us in our place. So I want to be able to equip our young people and those coming up with the narratives that they're going to, and the strategies that they're going to experience, and how they can defend themselves against that. Because, the group says it's a daily warfare, we know it is. So how do we do that? I've been involved in writing a couple of book chapters that are about to be published for the British Journal of Social Work. And a forthcoming one for next year. So I'm doing some projects, but yeah, my main priority is to get another book out this year.
You're a very busy woman.
Yeah.
Yes, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm starting social work, masters in social work in July. So please release it really quick so I can use it for assignments.
Okay.
That's great. Thank
no
you
pressure.
So much. So, Dr. Sam, any final advice on how male counterparts can support minority women to who aspire to attain leadership role?
Yeah, what I will say is based on my own experiences. I'll tell you something that maybe I should have said earlier on. I've never had a line manager who is male. All my line managers have been female, and I'm talking 7 of them across the span. 2 professors, 4 PhDs. No, actually 3 professors and 4 PhDs. And of the 3 professors, 1 was white, and then the other 2 were black women.
Wow.
And I've learned a lot from all of these women. That's why I said education is key in understanding what is happening. So I'll say let's educate ourselves. Then the second thing that's I think is so important is to respect, to appreciate, and to recognize the talent that all these minority ethnic, leaders are bringing to the table. It's not about the color of their skin, but it's
That's
about what
right.
they're bringing to the organization. And like I said, I have been led by some fantastic and phenomenal women who have learned a lot from, who have actually shaped my own career. And I wonder if I'd been that person who was so closed and so, tunnel vision in terms of things have to be this way. I wonder what would have been. And also it is important that people self reflect on their biases. They are there,
That's right.
there's nothing like people saying, oh, I don't have any biases, women are okay to actually work. No, they are there. And once one is reflected on this, it's important that corrective measures are taken. And also, we shouldn't be apologetic. The fact that there is an imbalance in terms of women leaders, especially from the global majority, we know that we want to create the several seats, as Joanne wants to or is advocating for. Then we shouldn't be apologetic in coming up with affirmative action, approaches. Let there be promotions that are targeted at ensuring that we've got more women, from the global majority in those boardrooms, in those positions of influence, because we are actually correcting an imbalance. We are correcting something that is wrong. So we shouldn't be apologetic in saying, oh, now for the next promotion, this will only be open to women. Why not? Because for a long time, it has been a free shot for males. So it's about time, I think, we change the course.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much. So, final words from Miss Juan, and how can we ensure that there is stronger support for the great work that you're doing for organizations and for women, ethnic minority women?
I guess in terms of providing stronger support for ethnic minority women, I'll definitely say making sure that code design is within the communities that you mean to serve. I think the best thing you can give to someone is a voice, because once they have a voice, they're visible. Once they're visible, they can have real influence. And that's where it happens. I'll keep that one short and simple. In terms of my advice, I guess for any young ladies listening today, I guess the biggest advice I'd give is don't underestimate the power of community. All it takes is one conversation, one connection, and one woman feeling seen for there to be a shift. There's a thing that we used to say in several seats. It's not about fixing your crown, but adjusting someone else's. Because in the role of us trying to go and become the best versions of ourselves, we often kind of have that tunnel vision. But real empowerment is adjusting another queen's crown. Real empowerment is uplifting another woman. Because like I said, through a connection, through conversation, that's when real change happens.
Right. Great. I think I don't need to add anything else. It's all been said, and it's been such a great pleasure having all of you on our virtual seat today. It's amazing. So thank you so much, Dr. Lace Jackson. Big thanks to Dr. Sam Sabanda. Very huge thanks to my very friend and lovely woman, Miss Rashida Fashina, and also to Miss Joanne Idowu. God bless you so much and continue to do the amazing, amazing work that you are doing. And we're going to sign out now. Thank you. Thank you.